Before the envelope, before the storm, before any of it, there was just a woman standing in the rain outside a Tim Hortons on Elgin Street, trying to get her umbrella to open. That was it. That was the whole scene. A woman in a gray wool coat, sensible boots, a canvas tote bag from the Ottawa Public Library hanging off her shoulder, wrestling with a broken umbrella spoke while the November rain came down sideways. Nobody looked at her twice. The man in the suit who brushed past her didn't apologize. The university student who nearly knocked her coffee out of her hand didn't look up from his phone. The security guard at the lobby of the building next door watched her for a second. That particular kind of watching, and then looked away. Nobody saw anything when they looked at Constance Aldridge. That was, in many ways, exactly how she preferred it. Constance was 44 years old. She had a daughter in her second year at Queen's University, and a car that needed new brake pads and a grocery list in her coat pocket that she kept forgetting to look at. She wore her hair pulled back most days, not because she didn't care, but because she'd stopped having the patience for things that didn't matter. She'd been a family court judge for 11 years. Before that, she'd clerked for the Supreme Court of Canada. Before that, she'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Vanier with her mother, who cleaned office buildings on the night shift and always had the kettle on when Constance got home from school. She didn't talk about any of that, not at work, not at the courthouse, not in the world where people called her Your Honor and straightened their ties when she walked into a room. Out here on Elgin Street in the rain with a broken umbrella and a library tote bag, she was just a woman who looked like she probably worked at a government office somewhere and took the bus home. She finally gave up on the umbrella, tucked it under her arm, and walked. She was halfway down the block when she nearly stepped on it. A wallet, brown leather, worn soft at the corners, lying open on the wet sidewalk just past a bus shelter. The rain had already darkened it. Inside, she could see the clear plastic sleeve of a driver's license, a couple of credit cards, and the corner of what looked like a significant amount of cash. Constance stopped. She looked at it for a long moment. She looked around. The bus shelter held 2 teenagers on their phones and an older man in a Canada Post jacket reading a paperback. No one was rushing back, panicked, patting their pockets. She crouched apstone and picked it up. The license read, Douglas? No, she corrected herself. The name on the license was Fletcher Row. The address listed was in Rockcliffe Park. The cash, when she carefully fanned it, without removing it from the wallet, was close to $800. There were 3 credit cards, a Costco membership, a business card for a wealth management firm, with his name on it in raised lettering, and a folded photograph. She didn't unfold it. It wasn't hers to unfold. She looked at the business card again. Fletcher Row. The address of the firm was on Spark Street, maybe 12 minutes on foot. She checked her watch. She had been planning to get on the 85 bus and go home. Her daughter Maisie was coming in from Kingston that weekend, and Constance had promised to have the spare room sorted out, which she had not yet done. She had brake pads to think about. She had the grocery list in her pocket. She put the wallet in her tote bag and started walking toward Spark Street. Later, people would ask her, or they would have asked her, if she had ever told the story. Why she didn't just drop it at a police station. Why she didn't call the number on the business card. Why she walked 12 minutes in the rain to return something to a stranger. The honest answer was that it didn't occur to her to do anything else. You don't keep what isn't yours. Her mother had taught her that in the apartment in Vanier, sitting at the kitchen table with the kettle going and the night shift just behind her. It wasn't a lesson that had ever felt complicated. What she hadn't accounted for was Fletcher Row. The office building on Spark Street was the kind of place that announced its own importance. Marble in the lobby, a security desk positioned so that you felt assessed the moment you walked through the door. The receptionist at the front was young, polished, and wearing the specific expression of someone who had been trained to be pleasant in a way that was not actually warm. "Can I help you?" she said, in the tone that meant, "I am already doubtful." "I'm here to return something to Fletcher Row," Constance said. She was dripping slightly onto the marble floor. She was aware of this. The receptionist looked at the tote bag. She looked at the coat. She looked at Constance's boots, which were practical and not new. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't. I found his wallet on Elgin Street, and I'd like to return it to him directly." A pause. The particular kind of pause where someone is deciding how much effort they want to spend on you. "I can take that for you," the receptionist said, holding out her hand, "and make sure it gets to him." Constance looked at the hand. She looked at the woman. "I'd prefer to return it to him personally. Mr. Rowe is in a meeting. I'm happy to wait." Another pause. The receptionist glanced at her colleague at the far end of the desk, the small, sideways glance of two people exchanging a private judgment, and then picked up the phone. Constance stood in the lobby and waited. She watched the rain through the glass doors. She thought about the spare room, and whether Maisie would mind if the extra blanket was still in the dryer. A man came down in the elevator. Constance had expected someone older. The wallet had the look of something that had been carried for years, broken in. But Fletcher Rowe was perhaps 50, trim, gray at the temples, in a very good suit. He came through the lobby quickly, the way men who are used to their time mattering tend to move, and his expression when he saw Constance was not quite annoyed. Accessory. The quick, automatic calculation of someone deciding what category this situation fell into. "You found my wallet," he said. It was not quite a question. "On Elgin Street, just past the bus shelter at the corner of Slater. It was on the sidewalk." Constance opened her tote bag, retrieved the wallet, and handed it to him. He took it, opened it, did a quick count the way people do. Something shifted in his expression. Not gratitude, exactly. More like the recalibration that happens when a situation doesn't go the way you expected. "Everything's there," Constance said. "I can see that." He looked up at her. "How did you find this office?" "Business card." "Right." He was already reaching into the wallet. "Let me. That's not necessary." He paused, card half extracted. "I'd like to give you something for your trouble." "It wasn't trouble," Constance said. "It was 12 minutes in the rain. Please keep your money, Mr. Rowe." He looked at her for a moment. She had the sense that he was not entirely sure what to do with her, and that this was not a feeling he was accustomed to. "Can I at least buy you a coffee? There's a place next door. I have somewhere to be. I'm glad you have it back." She pulled the strap of her tote bag back up onto her shoulder and turned toward the door. "I don't even know your name," he said behind her. She pushed through the glass door and into the rain. She didn't think about Fletcher Rowe again. There was Maisie's visit, and the spare room, and eventually the brake pads. There was the November docket, which was heavy, and a custody case that was keeping her up at night, and the first real snowfall of the season that made everyone in Ottawa briefly insane behind the wheel. Life was what it was. She moved through it. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, walking home through the rain that Tuesday evening, was what was inside Fletcher Rowe's wallet when she'd found it. Not the cash, not the cards. The photograph she hadn't unfolded. It was a picture of a girl, maybe 7 years old, gap-toothed, laughing at something off camera. On the back, in handwriting that had faded with age, were the words, "For Dad, love Penny, age 7. Fletcher Rowe had not spoken to his daughter in 6 years. The falling out had been his fault, and he knew it, and he had carried that photograph for 22 years, because putting it away had felt like giving up on something he hadn't yet earned the right to give up on. He'd lost the wallet 3 blocks from the coffee shop where, that same Tuesday morning, he had finally agreed to meet Penelope for the first time since the estrangement. He'd been sitting in the shop for 20 minutes before he reached into his jacket and realized the wallet was gone. He'd spent 40 minutes retracing his steps in the rain before giving up. He'd been certain, sitting in the lobby of his building afterward, that losing the photograph the same morning he was supposed to begin making things right was a sign of something. He was not a superstitious man. And then a woman in a gray wool coat had walked through his lobby door. He'd looked at her and seen nothing remarkable. He'd taken the wallet back from her hands, and it was only after she was through the glass door and gone that he'd opened the folded photograph and sat down heavily on a lobby chair and understood what had just walked out of his building. He tried to find her. He asked the receptionist. He asked the building security, who reviewed the door footage and gave him a timestamp but no name. He checked the lost and found at the Tim Hortons on Elgin. He called the non-emergency line for Ottawa police and explained that someone had returned his wallet and he wanted to thank her, and the officer on the other end of the line was patient, in the way of someone who has heard stranger things. Nothing. 3 weeks later, Constance was in courtroom 7 of the Ottawa courthouse, presiding over a child protection hearing. It was the kind of case that didn't make the news but that mattered enormously. A 12-year-old boy, a mother fighting to keep her family together against a system that was not always kind to people without resources. Constance had read every document in the file twice. She had asked questions that the children's aid lawyer hadn't been prepared for. She had given the mother's counsel more latitude than was strictly standard because the counsel was young and nervous and was clearly doing her best. She was not a soft judge. She was an extremely fair one. At 11 in the morning, there was a recess. Constance walked to her chambers, poured herself a coffee from the small machine on the credenza, and was reviewing a motion when her clerk knocked and came in. "Your Honor, there's someone from the Roe Foundation here. They've dropped off a letter." Constance looked up. The Roe Foundation? The charity, yes, for youth legal aid in Eastern Ontario. "The letter is addressed to you personally." She took it. The envelope was cream-colored, good stock. Her name was written on the front in the same kind of raised lettering as a business card. She opened it. "Dear Constance Aldridge, it took me 3 weeks and a favor from a colleague at the Law Society to find out who you were. I'm aware that's a strange thing to admit, but I want to be honest with you because you were honest, in the most uncomplicated way, with me. My name is Fletcher Roe. You returned my wallet on a Tuesday in November. I don't think you would remember me as anything other than an unpleasant experience, and I want to start by saying that the way my receptionist treated you was unacceptable, and I've spoken to her about it. I want you to know what was in that wallet. Not the money, the photograph. I don't need to tell you the whole story. But I want you to know that the photograph you chose not to look at was the only picture I have of my daughter from when she was small, and that I lost the wallet the same morning I was supposed to meet her, after 6 years of silence. I thought losing it was a sign. I thought losing that photograph meant I'd run out of road. And then you walked through my door. I met my daughter for coffee the following Friday. We've had 3 more since then. I don't know how to thank you for something like that. You didn't know what you were carrying. You just carried it. The Roe Foundation has funded a new bursary for court-involved youth in Ottawa, effective this January. We've named it after the street where you found the wallet. It seemed right. With genuine respect, Fletcher Roe. Constance read the letter twice. Then she set it down on her desk and looked at the window for a moment, at the gray Ottawa sky, and the bare trees, and the first pale suggestion of coming snow. She thought about her mother, on the night shift, moving through empty office buildings with a mop and a cart, and always having the kettle on. She thought about Maisie, home from Kingston for the weekend, sleeping in the spare room with the blanket Constance had finally got out of the dryer. She thought about the 12-year-old boy in courtroom 7, and his mother, fighting with everything she had for the right to keep her family whole. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of her robe. Then she stood up, smoothed her robe, and went back to work. But here is what the letter didn't say. Here is what Fletcher Roe didn't know when he wrote it. He didn't know that Constance Aldridge had grown up on the same block as the Elgin Street bus shelter where she'd found his wallet, that she'd ridden that same 85 bus for 6 years, every school morning, before she got a scholarship and everything changed. He didn't know that she'd walked past that corner 1,000 times before she was anyone, before she was Your Honor, before she was anything except a quiet girl from Vanier who did her homework on the bus because the apartment was small and her mother needed to sleep. He didn't know that the custody case in courtroom 7 had been on her mind for weeks, not just professionally, that the 12-year-old boy in that file had a mother who reminded her, in ways that were hard to articulate, of her own. He didn't know any of that. All he knew was that a woman in a gray wool coat had found something he'd lost and brought it back to him, and that it had cost her nothing except 12 minutes in the rain and the decision not to look at what wasn't hers. He thought that was the whole story. He thought he was the one who'd been changed by it. The ruling in the custody case came down in December. The mother kept her son. Constance drove home through the early dark, the city strung with Christmas lights, the Ottawa River steel gray in her peripheral vision on the Queensway. She had the radio on low. She was thinking about nothing in particular. She was thinking about everything. She stopped at a Tim Hortons on the way. Not the one on Elgin, just the one near her exit. She sat in the parking lot and drank her coffee while the windows fogged up around her and the snow started to come down in the orange-lit night. She thought about a woman mopping floors at 2 in the morning so that her daughter could sleep. She thought about a father with a photograph he'd carried for 22 years. She thought about how many things move through the world without anyone knowing what they're carrying. How many moments happen on an ordinary Tuesday in the rain that turn out to matter more than anyone at the time could possibly know. The coffee was too hot. She waited for it to cool. She thought, you don't keep what isn't yours. And then she thought, but sometimes you carry something for someone without knowing it, and that's enough. That's more than enough. The snow came down. She finished her coffee. She drove home. And that, right there, is the part of the story that never makes it into the headlines. Not the foundation, not the bursary named after a street, not even the father and daughter sitting across a table from each other after 6 years of silence. It's the moment in a parking lot, the cooling coffee, the woman who didn't think she'd done anything at all. Constance Aldridge never told this story. Not to Maisie, not to her colleagues, not to anyone. It wasn't modesty. It just didn't feel like her story to tell. It felt like everyone's story, or no one's, like one of those things that happens in the ordinary middle of an ordinary life and asks nothing of you except to notice it. So here is a question for you. Before you go, what would you have done? Standing in the rain on a Tuesday evening with somewhere to be, with a grocery list in your pocket and a broken umbrella under your arm. Would you have picked it up? Would you have walked 12 minutes out of your way for a stranger you would never meet again? You probably would. Most people would. That's what nobody tells you. That most people, given the chance, choose to do the right thing. The world runs on 10,000 unreported moments of ordinary decency, and we just never hear about them, because the people involved never thought there was anything worth saying. If this story made you feel something today, if it reminded you of your own mother, or your own walk home, or something you did once that nobody saw but that you still think about sometimes, share it. Pass it along to someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Let us know what you would have done, because we believe that kindness still exists. We believe it's everywhere, actually, if you know how to look. This is Velvet Honor, and we'll see you in the next one.